She threw it in the trash on a Saturday afternoon while I was upstairs taking a nap. She did it during a decluttering weekend. She had organized for my house, the house I had owned for 34 years, without quite asking me whether I wanted my house decluttered. She threw away a quilt my husband and I had made together, by hand, over the winter of 1986. She called it an old worthless thing. She put it on the curb with 3 bags of what she had decided was garbage. She thought she was throwing away fabric. She had no idea she was throwing away her own access to everything my husband had quietly built. By the time I found out where the quilt had gone, it was Saturday evening. By Wednesday morning, I had answered her not with tears, not with shouting, but with a single phone call and a folder my husband had left with a lawyer for exactly this kind of moment. Here is what actually happened. My name is Ruth. I am 73 years old. My husband Walter died in 2022. We had been married for 49 years. He had been a tailor, not a fashionable one, a working one. He had run a small alterations and menswear shop on the main street of our town in central Indiana for 41 years. He had hemmed trousers, taken in jackets, replaced zippers, and turned collars for 3 generations of the same families. People in our town still talk about his hands. He could make a $40 suit fit like a $400 one. He had also, across 49 years of marriage, taught me to sew. In the winter of 1986, the winter, our son Daniel turned 10. Walter and I made a quilt together. We made it over 3 months, in the evenings, after the shop closed and Daniel went to bed. It was a patchwork quilt, sewn from fabric scraps Walter had saved from the shop over the years. Wool, corduroy, flannel, a square of velvet from a wedding suit, a strip from a child's winter coat. Each square had a story, and Walter could name every one. That grey wool was Henry Albright's funeral suit. That blue corduroy was the Peterson boys' first day of school. That bit of green was the dress I took in for our own wedding. The quilt was not beautiful in a magazine way. It was beautiful in a we made this together way. It lay on the foot of our bed for 36 years. After Walter died, I moved it to the back of the linen closet because I could not bear to see it on the bed without him. I should have kept looking at it. If I had, it would not have been folded in the back of that closet on the Saturday. My daughter-in-law decided my house needed decluttering. Let me tell you about my daughter-in-law. Her name was Vanessa. She was 39. She had married my son Daniel in 2014. She was not a monster. I want to be fair. She was a certain kind of modern woman, organized, efficient, fond of clean counters and empty surfaces, and the particular satisfaction of throwing things away. She watched shows about decluttering. She used phrases like, "Does this spark joy?" She had slowly converted my son Daniel to the same religion until his house had the clean, blank, slightly hotel-like quality she preferred. I had not minded at first. It was their house, their life. What I had minded slowly, over years, was the way Vanessa began to look at my house. She would come over, and her eyes would move across my rooms, the way an appraiser's eyes move across an estate. The full bookshelves, the framed photographs on the hallway wall. Walter's sewing room, still full of his fabric and thread and his old industrial machine. I could see her cataloguing it. Clutter, clutter, clutter. She never said it directly. She said it in small, soft phrases. "Ruth, do you really still use all these books? Ruth, wouldn't the hallway feel so much more open without all those frames?" I deflected them, gently, for years. Here is the part I did not know at the time. Walter had been watching her longer than I had. I learnt this only later. From Margaret the lawyer, but I want to tell you now, because it matters. Walter had noticed Vanessa's eyes moving across our rooms back in 2015, the year after she married Daniel. He had said something to me once, offhand, that I had forgotten until Margaret reminded me of it. We had been at Daniel's house for dinner, and on the drive home, Walter had said, quietly, "That girl looks at things like she's deciding what to keep." I had laughed and said he was being unfair. He had not answered. What I did not know was that the very next week, Walter had gone to the bank and opened a safe deposit box I knew nothing about. And over the years that followed, while I was deflecting Vanessa's small, soft phrases and telling myself she meant well, Walter was quietly building something, paying off a building, setting up a trust, moving the most important things we owned into places where a certain kind of person could never reach them. He never told me. He just kept sewing in his careful tailor's way, a protection I would not discover until the day someone finally proved he had been right. That day was a Saturday in June. It began as a kindness, or it was presented as one. In April, Vanessa called. She said she'd been thinking, and she'd love to come spend a weekend helping me get the house in order. She said it would be a gift. She said Walter's passing had left a lot of things in the house, and that sometimes it helped to have someone objective go through them. I said, "Vanessa, that's very kind, but I'm managing fine." She said, "Of course, Ruth. I just worry about you in all that clutter." That word again. In June, she scheduled the weekend without quite asking. She told me on the phone that she and Daniel were coming the third weekend of the month to finally get the house sorted out, and that I should not lift a finger. I said, "Vanessa, I'd really rather." She said, "Ruth, I won't take no for an answer. Let me do this for you." And before I could find the words to stop a kindness I did not want, she had hung up. They arrived on the third Saturday of June. Vanessa came with rubber gloves, contractor trash bags, and a label maker. Daniel came with the sheepish look of a man who has been told what the weekend will be and has decided not to argue. She started in the morning with the garage, then the hall closet, then the pantry. She moved fast. By lunchtime, there were 6 full trash bags by the back door and a donate pile in the driveway. I tried to supervise, but Vanessa kept gently steering me away. "Ruth, sit down, relax. This is your day off. Go put your feet up." After lunch, I was tired. I am 73. I had spent all morning trying to keep up with a younger woman moving through my house at twice my speed. I went upstairs to lie down for what I thought would be 20 minutes. I slept for almost 2 hours. While I slept, Vanessa worked through the linen closet. She found the quilt at the back, folded, where I had put it after Walter died. She did not ask me about it. She decided it was in the words Daniel would reluctantly repeat to me later. An old, worthless thing, taking up half the closet. She put it in a trash bag. She carried that bag, with 3 others, out to the curb for Sunday morning's garbage pickup. Then she made herself a cup of tea and kept working, pleased with how much progress she was making on my behalf. She thought she had thrown away fabric. She had no idea. She had just carried her own future out to the curb in a black plastic bag. I came downstairs around 4 o'clock. The house felt strange, emptier, gaps on the shelves, fewer frames on the hallway wall. The counters bare in a way they had never been in 34 years. I felt a low, cold unease, but I told myself, again, that Vanessa meant well, that things could be put back. I went to the linen closet to get a light blanket, because the nap had left me chilly. The quilt was not there. I stood in front of the open closet for a long moment. Then I walked to the kitchen, where Vanessa was wiping down a cabinet. I said, "Vanessa." There was a quilt in the linen closet, a patchwork quilt. "Where is it?" she said, brightly, without turning around. "Oh, that old thing, Ruth. It was so worn out. It looked like it was held together with hope." I put it in the toss pile. "Don't worry, I already ordered you nice new matching linens. So much fresher," I said, very quietly. "Vanessa, where is the quilt right now?" Something in my voice made her turn around. She said, "I think it was pretty far gone, Ruth. So I think it went out with the trash bags. They're at the curb for tomorrow." She tried to smile. "Out with the old, in with the new," right? I walked, as fast as my knees would let me, to the front door and out to the curb. 4 black contractor bags sat at the end of my driveway in the warm June evening. I opened the first. Kitchen things. Old dish towels. The refrigerator magnet with Daniel's first-grade drawing still stuck to it. I set that aside. I opened the second. Papers, expired coupons, a broken lamp. I opened the third. There it was. Folded. Jammed down beside an old shower curtain. My quilt. I lifted it out with both hands. I held it against my chest, standing at the end of my own driveway in the evening light, while the neighbours' sprinklers ran. I did not cry, but my hands were shaking, because Vanessa did not know, could not have known what was inside the lining. But I knew, and as I held the quilt against my chest, I felt, through the worn fabric, the small, stiff rectangle Walter had sewn into the lining in the last month of his life. It was still there, but the quilt was only half the secret. The other half was waiting in a lawyer's office. I want to tell you what was sewn into the lining, because you need to understand what Vanessa nearly destroyed. In the last month of Walter's life, when he was too weak to work but still strong enough to sit in his chair with a needle and thread, he had asked me to bring him the quilt. I thought he wanted it for warmth. He had taken it onto his lap and carefully opened a small section of the lining seam at one corner, the way only a tailor of 41 years could, with stitches so fine you'd never know the seam had been opened. He had slid something inside. Then he had closed the seam again, by hand, in stitches that matched the original so perfectly that even I, who watched him do it, could never afterward find exactly where the seam had been reopened. I had said, "Walter, what are you doing?" He had said, "Ruth, I'm putting something where it'll be safe, where no one will think to look. People throw away everything except what they think is worthless. So I'm hiding the most important thing inside the most worthless-looking thing we own." He had patted the quilt. "Nobody's ever going to steal a homemade quilt, Ruth." He had been right about that. He had only been wrong about one thing. He had not imagined that someone might throw it away without ever knowing it had value at all. But even there he had protected me, because he had not put all of it in the lining. He had told a lawyer the rest. I want to pause and ask you something honestly. If you had found, in a trash bag at the end of your driveway, a quilt you and your late husband had made together by hand, a quilt your daughter-in-law had thrown away as worthless while you napped, what would you have done in the next 48 hours? I think a lot of women would have screamed at their daughter-in-law on the spot. I think some would have said nothing and quietly grieved and let it go to keep the peace. I think a brave few would have done what I did. I carried the quilt back into the house. I did not, in that moment, say anything to Vanessa about what was inside the lining. I did not want her to know. Not yet. She started to say, "Ruth, I'm so sorry if that quilt had sentimental." I said only, "We'll talk in the morning, Vanessa. I'm going to lie down." I took the quilt upstairs. I laid it on my bed, where it had lain for 36 years. I sat beside it. I ran my hand along the lining until I found the small, stiff rectangle, exactly where Walter had left it. I did not open the seam. Not yet. Because I knew what was inside. And I knew the more important half of what Walter had left me was not inside the quilt at all. It was in a folder, in a lawyer's office, where Walter had put it in the same month he sewed the lining. Vanessa thought she had thrown away fabric. Walter had made sure she was really throwing away her own access. I went to bed. In the morning, I called the lawyer. The lawyer's name was Margaret Chen. She had handled Walter's small business affairs for 20 years and had drafted both our wills. She answered her office line on a Sunday, which surprised me, until she explained she came in most Sunday mornings to work in the quiet. I said, "Margaret, it's Ruth Coleman. Something has happened, and I think Walter left something with you about it." Margaret was quiet a moment. Then she said, "Ruth, tell me what happened." I told her. the decluttering weekend, the nap, the quilt in the trash bags at the curb. When I finished, Margaret said, very quietly, "Ruth, first I need you to confirm something for me. Do you have the quilt back? In your possession, right now, undamaged?" I said, "I do. It's on my bed. The lining is still sewn shut." She let out a slow breath. "Good. That matters more than you know. If that quilt had gone out with the truck, some of what I'm about to tell you would have been much harder to prove. Walter knew that. It's part of why he did it the way he did." I said, "Margaret, what did he do?" She said, "Walter came to see me in October of 2022, about 6 weeks before he passed. He brought a folder. He told me to hold it until the day you called to say someone in the family had thrown away, sold, or tried to get rid of something of his they didn't understand the value of. Those were close to his exact words. He said you'd know it when it happened. He said the quilt might be involved." I said, "He mentioned the quilt?" Margaret said, "He said, and I wrote this down, Ruth. If Ruth ever calls you about the quilt, you'll know the day has come." I sat down at my kitchen table. I said, "Margaret, what's in the folder?" She said, "I'd rather show you in person. And I'd rather you open the lining with me there, not before. Can I come to your house tomorrow morning?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Ruth, one more thing. Have Daniel there." Walter was very specific that Daniel should hear this. Not Vanessa necessarily, but Daniel. Yes. That evening, I had a conversation with Vanessa. It was not the conversation she expected. She had spent the afternoon anxious, hovering, apologizing in small bursts. "Ruth, I really am sorry about the quilt. I didn't realize it meant so much." Daniel was quiet and uncomfortable, caught as always, between his mother and his wife. At dinner, Vanessa insisted on cooking. As a kind of apology, she said again, "Ruth, I feel terrible. I was just trying to help. I just didn't see the value in it." I set down my fork. I said, "Vanessa, I want to say something, and I want you to listen to all of it before you respond." She nodded. I said, "You didn't see the value in the quilt. I believe you. You looked at it and saw a worn-out old thing taking up space. And that exact thing is what I want to talk about. For 3 years, you've come into my house and looked at the things in it and seen clutter. The books, the frames, Walter's sewing room. You've never seen what those things are. You've seen only that they take up space that could be empty. And you've decided, slowly, that empty space is worth more than the things. This is my house, and the things in it are not clutter. They are 49 years of a marriage. When you throw one of them away because it looks worthless to you, you are not decluttering, you are erasing." Vanessa's eyes filled. She said, "Ruth, I didn't." I said, gently, "I'm not finished. That quilt you threw away as worthless? Walter sewed something into the lining before he died, and he told his lawyer about it. The quilt was not worthless, Vanessa. It was the most valuable thing in this house. You came one garbage truck away from throwing it away." The table went very quiet. Then Daniel spoke. For the first time all day, he looked up and his voice broke. He said, "Mom, I watched her carry those bags out. I saw the quilt in one of them. I recognized it. And I didn't say anything. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. I should have stopped her. I've been letting her decide what matters for 10 years, and today, I almost let her throw away the last thing you and Dad made together. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have stopped her." I looked at my son for a long moment. I said, "Yes, sweetheart, you should have." I did not soften it. He needed to hold it. Then I said, "But you're going to be here tomorrow morning when Margaret comes. Both of you. Stay the night. There's something your father wanted you to hear." Margaret Chen arrived at 9 the next morning. She brought a leather folder and set it on my dining room table. Daniel and Vanessa sat across from me. The quilt lay folded on the table in front of me. Margaret said, "Ruth, Before I open Walter's letter, show me the quilt is intact. I need to see the lining unopened. I turned the quilt over and showed her the corner. The seam was whole. Margaret nodded slowly, almost to herself, the way a person nods when something they have been holding their breath about for 3 years has finally come true, safely. She said, "All right, now we can begin." She handed me a sealed envelope, Walter's handwriting on the front. "Ruth, for the day someone treats our life like clutter." I broke the seal. I read it aloud, because Daniel and Vanessa needed to hear it. "Ruth, if Margaret is reading this with you, then someone in the family has finally done the thing I was afraid of. They've looked at our life and seen junk. They've thrown something away, or tried to clear it out. I'm guessing it's the quilt, because the quilt is the thing that looks the most worthless and is worth the most. I started worrying about this back in 2015, the year after Daniel married. I saw the way she looked at our things. I didn't say much to you, because I didn't want to poison how you saw her, and because I hoped I was wrong. But I'm a tailor. I spend my life noticing what's underneath what people show you. And I knew. So I started getting ready, quietly, a long time ago. Inside the lining are 2 things. A savings bond I bought in 1986, the year we made the quilt, and let grow for 36 years. And a small brass key. The bond is yours, Ruth. Cash it and do something for yourself. The key opens safe deposit box 412 at the bank, the box you don't know about. I opened it in 2015, the week after that dinner at Daniel's. Inside is the deed to the shop building downtown, paid off, held in a small trust I set up with Margaret. I never sold the shop, Ruth. I rented it out quietly after I retired and let the trust collect the rent. There's a good deal of money in that trust now. It's all in your name. I did this quietly because running a shop for 41 years taught me something. People show you who they are by how they treat the things they think are worthless. The ones who throw away the homemade quilt are the same ones who'd spend the trust on a boat. So I hid what mattered inside, what looked like nothing, and I told Margaret to wait. The trust has one rule, which Margaret will explain. Our son Daniel is the beneficiary after you, but only Daniel, not jointly with anyone. If our son is married to someone who treats your life like clutter, that person doesn't touch a single dollar of what you and I built with our hands. The trust skips her. It goes to Daniel alone, and after Daniel, to our grandchildren, directly. I love you, Ruth. Go open the lining. My stitches are still good, but you'll want scissors. Walter. The table was silent. Vanessa was crying openly now. Daniel had his hand over his mouth. I took the small scissors Margaret handed me. I found the corner of the lining, and I opened the seam Walter had sewn shut in the last month of his life. The seam so fine that even I had never been able to find it. Inside was a savings bond and a small brass key. I held them both in my palm. Margaret said, quietly, "The trust is real, Ruth. I administer it. As of this quarter, it holds just under $410,000. The shop building is paid off and currently rented, and the terms are exactly as Walter described. You are the primary. Daniel is next, individually. Vanessa is specifically excluded by name." She looked at the family across the table, not unkindly. She said, "Walter wrote that exclusion in 2022, not out of anger, out of observation. He told me, 'I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just letting the trust go to people who'd have saved the quilt.' I did not scream at Vanessa that morning. I did not need to. Walter had already said everything, in his careful tailor's way, more completely than I ever could. Vanessa understood, fully and at once, the size of what she had nearly done and the reason she had been written out. It was not a punishment I had to deliver. It was a consequence she had built herself, one small dismissive phrase at a time, across 3 years. She apologized. Genuinely this time. Not the bright, brisk apology of a woman tidying up a mistake, but the quiet, undone apology of a woman who has finally seen herself clearly. I accepted it. But I did not undo what Walter had done. The trust was irrevocable, and I did not want to. Daniel changed after that morning. The guilt did something to him, the good kind of something. He started coming to visit alone sometimes, just to sit with me. The decluttering weekends stopped. When Vanessa came, I noticed her looking at the books and the frames, and Walter's sewing room differently now, not as clutter, but as things she had nearly lost the right to be near. I cashed the savings bond and took a trip. I had always wanted to take a slow train journey through the Canadian Rockies, in the autumn, alone, with the quilt folded in my suitcase. The trust is still there. One day it will go to Daniel, and then to my grandchildren, directly. And the quilt is back on the foot of my bed, where it lay for 36 years. I look at it every night now. I made myself start looking again. That night, after Margaret left and Daniel and Vanessa had gone home, I sat in Walter's chair in the sewing room, the quilt across my lap and the small brass key on the table beside me, and I wrote one line in the notebook I had started keeping. My daughter-in-law threw my handmade quilt in the trash. She didn't know what my husband had sewn inside the lining, and I learned, at 73, that Walter had started protecting me back in 2015, the year he first saw the way she looked at our things, and had simply waited, the way a patient man waits, for the day she would prove him right with her own two hands. Sometimes dignity does not arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives in a trash bag at the end of the driveway, in the evening light, with the sprinklers running when you lift out the most worthless-looking thing you own, and feel, still safe inside the lining, the most valuable thing your husband ever left you. I closed the notebook. The house was quiet. The quilt was warm across my lap. Walter had seen it coming 9 years before it happened. He had only been a tailor. But he had been watching the whole time.